Welcome back to what I think will be the last video of this series about how to engage fully in any crisis, particularly the COVID pandemic and the associated economic challenges and societal challenges that are going with it, personally and for our communities. But it's going to be used for any crisis, any problem, any new problem that you haven't encountered before. And that's my life's work, has been to work out how do you fully resolve a challenge into value through ourselves, through metabolizing it internally in our incredible consciousness into something in the material world that's of value. So a super little example of this is I just read an article about a guy, British guy, he's a former soldier, and he's 99 years old, about to be 100, and he's living in lockdown for over 3 months because he's a vulnerable elderly man. And he's seen that our healthcare workers are lacking in food and equipment for PPE equipment. And he's taken this challenge and he's transformed it into value in himself through his actions, through his being. And he's walking up and down his living room, because he's locked down, with his walker, raising money. And it started off just being a few hundred. It's now over £12,500, about $20,000, maybe less. That's an example of taking a challenge, not complaining, trying to blame people, the government for not doing PPE, which of course they should have done, but that's not the point. The point is, what can I do? If I take this inside and metabolize it within, what possibility can I bring to the world to deliver something of value, which is better than what I was doing before, better fit to the world, and creates less suffering and ideally more thriving in the systems that I touch, that I'm part of. And he's seen the healthcare system, this massive system, something he can do something to transform, to bring some light into the darkness. And that's transformational being. And I say the word, I think this is going to be the last video because I am living my own practices. I have developed this pathway and these tools and these principles, 7 gems of biotransformation theory. And I'm attempting to bring my whole capacity, myself, into this reality, into the transformation of my own self around this pandemic and the fear of death of my loved ones, my own company and its challenges when people are not doing workshops, retreats, keynotes, talks, etc. And also, most importantly, the system I'm part of, which has been my work for 15 years. How do I serve the evolution of a better system of companies and organizations that are better fit to the world, better fit to our ecosystem and what its limits are, the planetary constraints we all have to live in. We only have one planet. And so I have been living this transformation curve for self-organization and system for the last 5 or 6 weeks since I was aware that the virus was coming. I was probably more aware of it earlier than a lot of people. I'm always looking for weak signals of the future in the present. And after securing my family and team, I've been really processing the fear, the shock, the trauma, the pain, the fear of death from my own past that this has brought up, the fear of losing everything. And now I'm just past the edge of chaos, just here. I mean, I'm not really, doing much. But one of the things that came to me was, now is the time. It was an insight. It was an intuition and an insight from within my heart and hara and my mind to my actions to record these sets of videos without all the usual stuff I have, a filmmaker and a script and all that kind of stuff, just to give what I've got. This is the best thing I've got. I've given money and all that kind of stuff as well, but what I've really got is this is 30 years of work asking one question every time: how do I transform myself so I can transform the world? That's what everything I do is about. So I hope this so far has been of use. There may be another video, but I think this is the unfolding of this particular project. And what we realize when we do this transformation curve with every challenge we face, if it's a new challenge, if it's something you already know how to do, don't bother transforming. Just do it the way you did it before. Best practice. Great. Make a cup of coffee the way you've always made one. But if you want a flat white, you might have to learn some new skills, have an upgrade in your capability and in your consciousness, and let go of using the old coffee and thinking that was great. Whatever, it works in every system, it's agnostic. And as you go through small transformation curves, you realize some of them are really big and they're kind of macro and there's kind of micro. And when you go through a macro one, a big transformation through maybe committing to marriage or having children or having your own company, you realize you are developing, you are expanding yourself towards a more complex and variable world. This is important because of the law of requisite variety from a guy who was both a systems thinker, very advanced in cognitive complexity, but he's also a psychiatrist, really understood human trauma and pain. And he brought to us this rule, which is that an organism, to survive, a biological organism, has to match the level of complexity of its environment. So if you're an amoeba living in a splodge, then that's a level, amoeba is a perfectly good level of complexity for a splodge of goo. But if you live in a complex globalized system with stuff from China coming just in time to be delivered through your Amazon Prime to feed your family, and you're working over here with a virtual this and whatever, super complex. And we need to have organisms, ourselves as individuals, and organizations, from a small company right up to a multinational or a government or a national government or the UN, supranational government, that fits the level of complexity with the level of variety, creativity within it. And that's partly what this is all about, is finding creativity and complexity within us that can match our environment so we can be adapted to it and thrive within it and not suffer. Because when we start to not fit the environment and the delta between the world changing and ourselves becoming more patterned, more reactive, more in our ever-decreasing circles, we start to suffer. And then we have other patterns like addictions to try and relieve the suffering. Should also make clear that the orientation of transformation is always first to reduce suffering rather than to bring about the good. Because if we bring about the good, we often end up thinking we can control the world and protect everyone with our idea of the good, and often causes suffering for other people, other tribes, other ethnicities, other types of people in our determination to believe we have the good for everyone. Whereas if we orient ourselves to reduce suffering with our purpose work, we usually, it's like preventative wisdom that stops us causing lots of pain elsewhere. So I always talk about reducing suffering first, because suffering is often quite clear, and increasing thriving second. Not so increasing pleasure or joy or convenience or consumer happiness, but about thriving in and through the challenges of life. So, as we move through transformation curve after transformation curve, we get to be able to do it more elegantly. We are aware of the pain and the joy within it. We aren't afraid of it. We can actually accelerate it ourselves. We can dive into it, go with that flow as we rush down the waterfall rather than resist and try not to go down it. We can hold ourselves and others through the difficult patches. We know that if we're feeling this kind of weird feeling or disoriented or whatever, it's all part of the process. The expansion and contraction of transformation, creativity, and then return to some kind of order and protection, transformation, contraction, expansion. And that's very natural to go through that process of it's all possible, it's all great, to oh my God, it feels terrifying and scary. And a lot of people who do transformational work don't share enough with people about that feeling of it's all great, it's all good, expansion and then contraction. It's just a natural part of this process. Although as you do it more, you can get more into the midline of the third way between possibility, yay, optimism, and oh my God, it's so tiring and difficult, I can't deal with it, I just want to go back to how things were. So as we orient ourselves towards transformation in every area of our life, remember we're in a transformation curve or a decline in every area of our life, maybe without knowing it, we start to be able to consciously upgrade ourselves, our capabilities. And that's where we start to end up in these different stages of human development. And you can see people go through these stages as they go through their careers, they go through loving someone else, committing, parenting, etc. And we develop ourselves vertically with our cognitive behavioral complexity, so we can see and understand complex systems, different lenses, modern, pre-modern indigenous wisdom, modern intelligence, reason, enlightenment, thought, science, postmodern critiques of power, and rationalism, to become meta-modern systems thinkers who can use all different lenses without destroying or negatively criticizing any of them, seeing them as valuable, holding paradox. That's all up there. And then as I found out myself, if you've got all that but without lots of embodied wisdom, you end up being a brilliant, smart, genius thinker, systems thinker, I don't know, guru, but your own relationships aren't working. You might be dominating, you might be abusing your power. So I've learnt the hard way that we want our embodied wisdom to temper and ground our cognitive complexity for us to be truly transformational people and truly transformational leaders. And what I've worked out with these 5 stages of development as leaders, as people, as consciousness, but consciousness is being in the world, not just clever ideas, is that there are 5 stages that you can sort of discern. And they are, I'll put them in blue, and they are the stage of the follower, the deliverer, the innovator, the transformer, and speculatively, because I haven't been there myself, the regenerator. So that's the follower, where we learn how to follow the rules of a system. We learn at high school and university how to do biology, or be a journalist, or be an artist, or we have to follow some rules. Someone gives them to us, and we learn to follow them. And then if we take lots of ownership and responsibility, we learn to follow the rules for ourselves, not for someone else, and we become excellence makers in some field. Then once we've cracked the rules, we can disrupt them and innovate in our field, break it open to insight and transformation. Then we become a transformer, when we care less about innovation for ourselves and our own power and genius and crushing the competition and disrupting a market. We become transformers guided by purpose. And then speculatively, I believe we become what I call a regenerator, an elder, who cares less about changing the world and more about regenerating their community before leaving this reality and passing on. And the key to stage theories, all stage theories, I remember I'm standing on the shoulders of many, many very smart, smarter than I, evidence-based, data-driven thinkers, is that two things really important. You can't skip to a higher, more expanded stage without nailing the stage before. Otherwise, you are undeveloped in key areas. So you might be a beautiful change agent, but you can't deliver a project to time and to budget and to excellence, which causes you challenges and causes suffering for you and the system. But also, you don't destroy the previous stage. You include it and break out of its constraints to get to the next stage. And each one of these, obviously, there's a massive transformation curve where you give up something to get something. Give up, get, give up, get, give up, get. So the follower gives up being a victim of the boss, of the rules, of the system, of the man, to own the system, own the rules themselves, and deliver on them for their own joy by being responsible. And then they gain responsibility, ownership, excellence. They become a manager, etc. The deliverer has to give up social conformity and certitude that the rules are right to be able to disrupt them and break them and to risk people not liking them because they're an innovator and changing things. The innovator has to give up fame and fortune, the desire to be on the front cover of Forbes or to be on Fast Company magazine or to be at some tech awards for disrupting the world, to be a billionaire, to give all that up, to be able to be a true transformer driven by purpose, not by profit, performance, productivity. And purpose I define as love in action. It comes from reconnecting our hearts, and then it comes through our mind and ideas, and it comes out through our hands. It's love in action. It's an orientation of the whole, coming through us as an individual, apart, back to the whole in service. So often a lot of pain to go from an innovator to transformer, and sometimes that descent into letting go of the past, letting go of patterns is forced upon us in mid-age as we go, hold on a minute, I'm a genius and I've mastered the universe and I'm wealthy and whatever, but my life isn't as meaningful as I wanted it to be, ... And then to give up, we have to give up being the center of attention, being the transformational agent, being the leader who's going forward, I think, to become a real elder, to allow other people to come up in that space and to focus more on sort of regenerating the soil, the ground of being in our communities, before we give up. The final curve is just the descent, as far as we know, and we give up life itself, and we pass on, hopefully, with grace, with elegance, with confidence, and with serenity. So those are the stages of development. And of course, my invitation is to use every crisis you face, every pain, suffering, challenge, difficulty, to consciously develop yourself up these stages. The stage above is not better than the stage before. It's not a better human being, or everyone's equal of value as a human being. But it's definitely of more use in transforming our society, which seems to be really in need of it at every level, because our global socioeconomic system seems to be not working. It's not working for a lot of people. Even the very wealthy, the 1% or the 0.1%, a lot of them aren't very happy. They're not very peaceful, meaningful lives. It's not working for a lot of people who feel they are oppressed by low wages and stagnant wages and meaningless jobs. It's not working for the environment, which then doesn't work for us, because then we have climate change risks and droughts and billions of locusts across the whole of Africa now, eating something like 8,000 times the normal level. We're all facing floods and droughts and tsunamis and sea levels rising and different climatic conditions, microplastics in our flesh, species extinctions. We might lose all our pollinators, our bees are dying, then we can't have any food. So this whole thing is one thing, and it seems to be inviting us with every crisis. 2008 crisis, this crisis, the next one, if we don't learn and grow and expand our society up this pathway to be a regenerative, transformational society, there'll be more crises and more pain and suffering. And remember, the key principle is that you can't not go on a transformation curve at any point with any difficult challenge that you haven't solved before. If you've solved it before, keep doing it. If you haven't solved it before, you have to go on this journey. But it can be much shorter, it can be much less painful, and you can accelerate the process using different practices, different tools, different ways of thinking, different procedures to get through and up and out faster and with less grief. I mean like treacle stickiness, not grief, as in the grieving that often has to occur as we release an old pattern and really feel the pain that was inside us. And the way to get through here, as I mentioned in previous videos, is what I call the connection solution. It is to connect to something in this mode, in creating connect mode, in our connective consciousness, to something bigger than the fear and the pain, including the fear of death. And the only thing I've ever learned that's big enough is this feeling of connection we get when we open ourselves up to our universe that we're part of, innately part of. And you can experience that as brotherhood, or in Advaita Vedanta, the Hindu tradition, as Brahman. Doesn't matter where and how you feel it and the language you use. What's important is we feel it, the sense of connection coming into us as love, or through a different lens as purpose into the world. And we take refuge inside. And that's why these inner practices are so important, because they create a sanctuary within, where we can keep returning, no matter how crazy the storm is. We can keep returning to presence, to peace inside us, to the sanctuary. Peace, where possibility emerges, and we can then listen again to our intuition and our insights about what the future can be created as through the possible world. And every crisis, every problem is what we can call metaphorically a strange attractor that pulls us down into this transformation curve. It's a word from systems thinking, complexity science. And in the sanctuary within, we can liquefy the old through love. The feeling of love that we get when we're connected liquefies patterns, it liquefies narratives that aren't working, it liquefies assumptions of our business model, it liquefies the idea of externalities of carbon somehow don't matter, that we can have limitless resources. It liquefies all that elegantly and easily with grace, and it allows unfolding of the new, whatever that possibility is that's coming out wherever we are, to keep receiving more insight and intuition, to bring more of ourselves to the table. And it seems to be something to do with nature too. So I just want to put a little bit of thought in here that whereas this mode, separation consciousness, analytical consciousness, sees ourselves as separate to nature, even in the Bible, which is the heart of Western thought, is this idea that we're separate from the animals and we have dominion over them, even says that. To remember, in this mode, we are all connected. Yes, it's useful to control nature and to stop disease and to stop floods with dams and with dikes, and that's great, but we can't ever fully control and protect the raw power of nature that we are ourselves part of. And so as we realign ourselves in this midline, not just trying to control and protect the world and nature with dominion, with innovation, with technology, to always be in an empathic, dialogical connection with nature, to rewild our heart, to rewild our purpose, and bring that rawness and that wildness back into our being. Not everything has to be always so polished and so controlled. And that spark of wildness, of rawness, is our inherent nature to be of nature. Doesn't mean you have to go and hug a tree. You may want to. I have done. Sometimes it works for me. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes just looking at a flower or becoming an empathic relationship on a run through the woods. And I just remember who I really am, which is part of that nature. And that allows me to let go of the and the hubris and the desire to implant my vision onto the world. And I remember, this is me and I am this. I am that. I am that flower, I am that tree, I am you, and you are me, to some degree. And when we remember that, we see that these transformational crises, these problems, these transformational challenges are always an invitation to ride the transformation curve and come out with more purposeful ideas. So one that's already occurring right now, I read, is Costa Rica has proposed a collective coronavirus information, treatment, vaccine pool, a collective commons, where different countries and scientists will give their IP, their knowledge, their data sets, their vaccine ingredients, recipes, whatever. And then we can fight or we can engage with this pandemic, which is global, at a global level. Because we can't be doing it nationally. If one country does it, but the other country doesn't stop the disease, it'll just keep coming back. So that's a level of order of complexity that's better fit with the global world and the virus traveling through airports and boats and whatever globally. However, you have to give something first to have that brilliant, amazing collective intelligence system where we can all get vaccines. Every human on Earth can be vaccinated if they want to be, or treated, or antigen tested, whatever. Is we have to give up the fame and fortune and desire to be the Nobel Prize winning genius, to be the person who makes billions out of the vaccine. We have to give up all that control and protect mode stuff. Not all of it, some of it, in order to be transformational as collective innovators of the vaccines. That's just an example. It's happening right now. But it will be stopped by me, mine and more, of wanting individuals wanting and companies wanting to own everything, which is not a good fit for the situation we're in. So there's an invitation here for you, for me, for all of us to see this pandemic, but also other crises that are erupting around it and beyond it, as an invitation to ride a transformation curve and come out with something that's a better fit in our own careers, in our companies, whether we work for ourselves, freelancers, whether we run companies like I do, or whether we're part of multinationals or government departments or supranationals, is to shift our products, our processes and our people so that they are more adapted to this reality through transforming ourselves first. So we come up with those ideas and those intuitions which will allow us to bring better fitted product services, government policies, party policies, movements, activities and actions to the world. And then we'll have to give something up. And so I'm going to ask you, what are you prepared to give up to bring about this recalibrated world? Travel, comfort, convenience, wealth, the idea of a dream pension, the idea of a dream retirement, private schools. I don't know. I'm going to give up. What are you going to give up to really go on this? Because if you're clinging to stuff, you'll never get round the curve. You can't game this system. You can't pretend you're willing to give stuff up. Because then if you do, you still won't have the ideas and intuitions because they'll be full of information and instinct. You won't have spaciousness inside your body mind, your unified body mind. And I don't believe we have to destroy anything of our world. Capitalism, nationalism, Anglo-Saxon ethnicity, nothing. What we do have to bring a recalibration to our socioeconomic and capitalist and nationalist political systems. It's all one system, really, because I think they're really far oriented towards productivity and profit for the protector, and the control mode doesn't even work for the 1%, right, or the 1.1%, because they're not always very happy, they're not thriving, not meaningful lives. Often our stage transformation can be precipitated by a midlife crisis or a quarter life crisis. They seem to be happening more and more, where we realise we're on a decline into lesser fit, smaller circles of operation, and we have a choice to carry on, hit rock bottom and maybe transform, or consciously transform and come out to the next stage through this process. So I believe that we are invited to bring a third way back into our lives, politics, into capitalism, that honours the desire to control and protect, to conserve the past, traditional right-wing ideas, that honours our creative genius as individuals, what happens when we take responsibility as an entrepreneur, a social, purposeful entrepreneur, to do something myself and not wait for the consensus or the group to do it. But always know that we're doing it in service, not of our own glory and our own fame, fortune and profit. Some of that's fine, but to do it in a gift back to the whole that we're part of. The part honouring the whole, and the whole inspiring and keeping safe and connected the part. And that's the calibration I think we're being asked for in what I call the Great Transformation, where we use the pandemic and climate change and inequality and all these big challenges, and we use them as an invitation to go on the big journey of what are we going to give up? What are we going to give up in companies? What are we going to give up in government, in our communities? What conveniences and comforts of the modern age in order to have a system that fits our planetary constraints of one planet? And how do I, as an individual, bring that into my part, my house, my fridge, how I buy food, where I go on holiday, how often, when, what my business and career looks like, etc., etc. That's the Great Transformation. And I believe this pandemic is accelerating the requirement to ask those questions if climate change wasn't enough, which just still seems a little far off, but it isn't, I don't think. And the Pope has an interesting point to say on this, is he has talked about the idea of downshifting ourselves, rather than being assessed as control and protect mode is with GDP growth, with scaling our products, with getting more clicks and likes of our YouTube videos, etc. Obviously, please click and like and share, etc. Is that we start to recalibrate the desire for growth, which has led to scalable, brilliant products and services for so many and lifted billions out of poverty, but to temper it with a desire to have more presence, more connection, more caring in life. One of the things we've learned from this pandemic is we can do without conveniences, but we can't do without doctors and nurses and communities that care about us and look out for us as we look out for them. And that's recalibrating to a downshift away from this hyper-modern desire for speed and scale at all costs, to still have speed and scale and the capacity to do all that stuff, which is amazing. That's why I work in innovation and transformation in some ways. And I want to get all my content out to the world and stuff and ideas and toolkits and programs, but never at the cost of my own well-being, my own presence to myself, to my family, to my friends. There's no point being a purpose-driven entrepreneur with purpose widow and a purpose orphans who don't see their dad enough, and when they're there I'm always trying to solve someone else's problem rather than just being here now. And that is what I think we're being invited to, where growth is not the only aim, it's an aim, but it's growth within the context of reducing suffering and increasing thriving. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of thought about the final gem 6, the 6 spirals of transformational action, of doing stuff in the world when something's not working, when something's stuck, when there's stress, when there's suffering. And before I do that, I just want to give you one more tip about when you're doing something transformational. It doesn't matter what scale, self to system. You might have insights and intuitions and breakthroughs and bring reconnection and healing and things into the world, and innovation and regenerative systems and business models, and then realize that you're attached to them going well and being great and maybe giving you respect or reputation or money or whatever. And that's supernatural. And there are lots of traditions that have captured this. And one of them is written up in a great text called the Bhagavad Gita, a beautiful wisdom text, which talks about the attachment to the fruits of our actions. And we want to really watch the desire to attach to the outcome, the growth, the data, the metrics. We want to be totally committed to the fruit, to creating fruit, to being fruitful with our gifts of fruit to the world through our projects and our possibilities and our programs and our just actions with our loved ones, our family, friends. But we want to really watch the control and protect mode's desire to get attached to those outcomes. Am I brilliant? Am I going to get rewarded for it? And one of the hacks the Bhagavad Gita gives, and which I teach people, is to devote our purpose work to the world. And that hacks us out of gripping and attachment and brings us back into the midline, where we still have to exist and we still want to have reward and we still want to be paid for our work and to be honoured, but we're no longer all about me, the me, mine and more show. And I do this every time I give a keynote, or give a video, do a write anything. I bring myself back to my midline between control and create, between connective consciousness and analytical consciousness, between excellence and presence, between ego and essence. And I do a little, I don't know what it is, where I say something like, universe that I'm part of, please give me the ideas, words, insights, intuitions, information, instincts to serve what's seeking to emerge through me right now, to own my channel with chutzpah, to believe I can change the world, but to always breathe out, exhale the humility of knowing who the hell am I to think I can do anything for anyone, and to live in that third way midline between the two, and with everything I say, to seek to heal and to relieve suffering and to alleviate pain and to bring more thriving, not necessarily pleasure, into this what system that I'm part of right now, that I'm touching. So guide me to do that. And when I say the universe, I mean the universe inside me as much as the universe outside me. As Tolstoy said, the kingdom of God is within. Every cell is somehow ineffably, potentially effably, connected to everything else, maybe through the quantum field of all things, as well as the separate mechanistic field of atoms and particles. And that devotional bhakti, giving back from the part to the whole, keeps us in a loop of openness and delivery that allows us to truly be transformational in any moment. So I'm going to leave you finally with the 6 spirals of action, of transformational action, which you can use at any point, any day, morning, noon, evening, the rest of your lives. And to make it also more valuable, I'm going to put up a tool that we give our leaders and our workshop attendees of the 6 spirals, with 2 questions for each spiral. And I'll put up in a minute on, as a title, the link to go to for you to download it, and hopefully it's of value to you now and in the future. And the 6 spirals go like this. I'll put them in green for action. So we start here with ourselves, small. Who am I? How am I showing up? Transform myself. So it's the world of conscious development, conscious expansion of ourselves, of personal leadership, of responsibility for ourselves, of sovereignty. And the first spiral is, how am I showing up? And am I in pattern? Am I in a box, or am I feeling responsive and fluid, biodynamic to the moment? And how do I get to that point? Now let's tap back into my purpose. Why am I here? What's my ethical feeling? Where are my intuitions and my instincts telling me is the right thing to do right now? Not right for some external morality, but right for right now. That's purposeful leadership and ethical leadership. And then expanding into, okay, this problem that I've chosen to transform for myself, for my company, for my world, deciding on which scale you want to do that. What are the creative ideas that come out when I get in the right mode and I really engage with it fully and bring it inside me to metabolize? And that's creative leadership and creative thinking, and it's innovation leadership. Now, how do I get my team, my people around me, my movement, my network to work collaboratively to bring about that idea? Because if it's an idea of any ambition, it will need collaboration of more than one person. That's team and collaborative leadership. Now, how do I inspire not just my team, but my whole organization, our user base, our stakeholders, our investors, our donors, citizens, people, through narrative, through embodying the change myself, that's influencing and inspirational leadership. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then finally, how do I use this project, this product, this service, this action today, this email, this Facebook post to serve the transformation of the system, and that's systemic and regenerative leadership. How do I bring about regeneration with every act? So you go from self to system and then way back again, and cycle through, continuously spiraling through a transformation curve, spiraling around and through it. And that's the 6 spirals of transformational action. So thank you if you've stayed with me the whole program, 6 videos. Thank you if you've done just a bit. Thank you for your attention, this incredibly scarce resource in our lives. And I really invite you to invest your attention into things that bring about your own thriving, a reduction of your own suffering, and the reduction of our shared suffering and increasing our shared thriving. Please stay in touch with me, ask questions in the YouTube comments, connect with social, sign up to our newsletter, switchonnow.com, download the freebies, the meditations, come on a program with me, whatever, or don't. But stay safe and stay connected. Stay safe, control and protect mode, 3rd way midline, stay connected, stay present, stay purposeful, stay loving. Thank you.